This time on Azeroth, I finish leveling to 60, I collect my epic mount, and ultimately review my experience as a brand new player in classic World of Warcraft. Since it had been a few months, I picked up where I left off before quitting. Level 54. I had a bunch of rested XP, so I figured the last few levels would be a breeze. I was tasked with throwing someone's cat into an acid bath, I raided some Satan-loving furry cave, mindlessly killing bears and wolves, and it was at this point in Daenerys that I realized I should level in Ungoro Crater to hopefully find some Devilsaur leather, as I had only one. I would eventually need 22 pieces of Devilsaur leather to craft my pre-raid bis pants and gauntlets. That's 22 giant T-Rexes and likely over 50 other players competing for the same material. As I landed and started my hunt, I was swiftly reminded that there was a zero-tolerance policy for those not in the Devilsaur Mafia. So I decided to try and collect a trinket from the Sunken Temple. Kill the Green Drake. Not so hard, is it? I arrive in Booty Bay and immediately get murdered on the dock by a scheming little rat fucking subhuman gnome. Over the next 4 days, I went through 2 Sunken Temple groups, who both somehow had no clear idea of where to go or what to do. The dungeon is already confusing enough, and just as we're about to go kill the Drake I need, we somehow wipe and everyone leaves, both times. Since it had already taken me almost a week to even find a group, and both groups leaving in a fraction of the time it took me to find them, I decided to cut my losses. It's all about that grind. The next dungeon on my list for pre-raid bis is LBRS. Inside, there's men I need to kiss, and if we get to it, maybe they can get the fist. Anywho, moving on. My first LBRS run was smooth. We lost a DPS, but that's fine as I got some goodies, a new pet, and my first pre-raid bis item, the Slash Claw Bracers. And with this new pet marks the return of an old friend from my earlier levels. Everyone, welcome back. Immediately after, I ran LBRS again. I figured since the return of Big Dick Dan, I was unstoppable, but this run was an entirely different monster. Our tank reserved the Greater Fire Protection Potion, which was fine with everyone, but what we didn't know was that he was on a time limit. Like many classic players, he was in his mid-30s and he had kids he had to pick up. So we had to bid him farewell, and seeing as it takes almost a fucking hour to find a tank in classic WoW, it was up to us to finish the dungeon. Since I had gotten back into the game, I respect to beast mastery. This means that Big Dick Dan was on steroids, and I took control of the group. Heals on my pet, and we pull very slowly and kite the best we can. It was rough, and there were many times where we had to wipe in order to clear some packs, but we persevered, killing the final boss with only our rogue surviving. Throughout my time on Azeroth, I've usually done the dungeons once, maybe twice, but I was about to do LBRS for the 3rd time, and this run was somehow worse than the last. I also forgot to turn my camera off. To start things off, our tank was somehow worse than I was at this game, and I'm a troll huntard. Nearly every pull, our healer died because our tank would lose aggro or die too fast, and eventually our healer had enough. I didn't blame them, and we got a new healer, but then our tank had enough of us, thank God, and we found another tank. Then we lost our rogue, and then when we did a skip, I summoned Dan just to aggro everything underneath and kill me again. The sole reason I was even doing this dungeon again was to hopefully get some better gear and hit 60. And after almost 3 hours, I hit 60. I was done. There it is, boys. My journey was so close to an end. We slog through the rest of the dungeon, and I leave the second I get a chance. I let someone in chat pick my epic mount, and I log off for that day. That was my journey to 60, almost 200 hours, many of which were spent doing absolutely nothing to progress my character, many spent aimlessly trying to satisfy my bloodlust for gnomes, and plenty sitting and waiting for a healer or a tank to come along and save me from this prison that is the LFG chat. This is the end for this troll. His final push. He made it. The next little bit of footage will just be random dungeon footage as I talk about my experience with the game. I did not get super into the endgame, and I will explain why shortly. This is ultimately my review of World of Warcraft Classic Era. From the very start, I fell in love with the simplicity and pacing of this game. There wasn't any confusing mechanic that made the game unfun. The in-game community, for the most part, is very welcoming and accepting of new players. Whenever I asked anything of a player, I would usually get help or an answer back. Coming into this game, I heard that everyone who played was a toxic bitch, just like me. Although true, in some areas, it is quite different than that. Sure, there are a few that stand out, but they are mostly in the other faction. In the early game, if I leveled up, got a new bow, or a new kind of arrow, I would feel the difference. Although it didn't feel like that as much when I continued later into the game, since the only difference in gear would be % hit chance or some tiny obscure stat that didn't feel like much changed other than, oh boy, I didn't miss yet. But then again, that could just be the hunter experience, but what do I know? I've only played one class. The world at times is beautiful and exciting to explore, with some barren areas that are a lot less fun to be in, but still nice. But the neat thing is, you can go wherever the hell you want in Classic, since there isn't a direction the game puts you in. You just get dropped into Azeroth and go your own way, giving the game a sense of adventure. I was planning on complaining about leveling, but now that I hit 60, I think that there's nothing wrong with it. The real journey of the game is how you got there. The amount of players I met along the way, the rage of dealing with animals with nothing better to do with their time other than gank 30s in Stranglethorn Vale, the planning ahead on how you're going to obtain the next rank of a profession or an item. This entire time, I thought I was planning to reach 60 and start playing the real game, when I've already been in the real game for the last 9 months. I've already beaten it. I've completed my journey. I've already concluded this is easily the best game I've played in a very long time, and it has to be on anybody's list of must-play games. Now, I will list the things I didn't like, not as arg game bad, but I want this game to have more players, so I can play it with more people, like my buddies in real life who don't play MMOs. MMOs are only really playable if there are people playing it, so I am saying this as my opinion, and I am not trying to convince anyone of anything. Let's start with what might be a common issue: class balance. When I was about 45, I was pretty upset with my choice of class. I usually never play ranged DPS in games, but I chose Hunter because why the hell not? It's something new. Now I'm sure Hunters have their uses, but in dungeons or just questing, there were many times where I thought, man, it'd be handy if I had this class, because of their utility or AoE and so on. But to balance it out, Hunters have a pet. Unless you spec Beast Mastery, it's not super engaging. What I mainly want to talk about with classes is tanks, especially with Horde. Asking around for tanks is rough, especially since both tank classes for Horde have 3 other specs to choose from. Druids with their Feral, Moonkin, or heals. Warriors can go protection, but have 2 other specs for DPS. It would be better if you could inspect players from the Who tab, or have their spec listed if you hover over them. This would make it easier to get groups going without resorting to a group finder. Speaking of the way to make groups, something has to change about the LFG chat. The amount of times I'm looking for a group or trying to gather people for a group gets swallowed up by boosters, boosting Discord servers, GDKP runs, guild invites, or other people looking for players just like me. It sucks because the chat is always moving, or it's just getting pushed up because some mage has to put a wall of text to advertise their boosting services. It's gotten a little bit better since they added a way to counteract spammers, but there still has to be a way to mute words or just get rid of boosting altogether, or make subsections of LFG meant for dungeons, raids, GDKP, the whole lots, so everyone keeps what they want and we're not all piled into the same chat. Next, let's talk about World PvP. I think it's great. I love World PvP, but what makes it unfun is people who are geared out of their mind purely picking on lower level / skill players because they have nothing to do before the raid or people like. So if there could be an option to just turn off World PvP when you need to, that would be sick. Unless I'm dumb and that already exists on PvE server. I went on a PvP server because I thought PvE was 0 PvP at all. Finally, let's talk about the late game and why I'm not gonna keep going with it. First things first, each guild I've joined is usually pretty stale, except for the one I joined maybe at level 10, because I was pretty involved with that guild and they actually helped me out quite a bit, you've seen in my videos. But the rest that I've joined after only raid, doesn't actually play with lower level players, so no help getting pre-raid bis or necessary items to raid. Second, I think pre-raid bis items don't feel nearly as rewarding to get as anything early. I farmed my Devil Sword gear and it felt like maybe I did a fraction more damage. So I went and I got more pre-raid bis, and nothing felt any different. If this is how receiving new items feels for the rest of the game, then I don't want to keep going. No, I don't want to farm Rune Cloth for reputation for different mounts. No, I don't want to farm a dungeon for grueling hours just to get 1% hit chance. And no, I don't want to do the PvP modes to contribute to a rank that ultimately means nothing. I would maybe do these things if I could still progress towards something, like if I was leveling weapons or gear, or if I had to get some extra levels outside of 60 for my specific spec. Because both me and my pet hit 60, there isn't anything to progress towards to. Now I would totally continue to the late game if I could raid right away. But since most raids won't accept you if you don't have that pristine hit chance gear, the gear that would take at least 4 to 6 runs of each dungeon they're in, and maybe short or very long depending on your group, doing all that just to try and min-max your character is not worth it to me as someone with limited time to play games. But keep in mind, I am still very content with my experience in Classic, and even with my personal complaints, I still think it is one of the better games of the generation, and I am confident Season of Discovery will recapture the experience many online gamers crave, attracting new players such as myself. To sum it up, World of Warcraft Classic is a forgotten gem that makes you feel a part of a world, seeing people who level alongside you, conquering the zones and dungeons, and is worth your time and money. This is the last time you will see this troll. He's glad you followed him throughout his time as a member of the Horde, and he wishes you luck for whenever you start your own journey here in the World of Warcraft. Did I get the thing? Okay, can I leave now? Alright, I'm out of here. Later, bitch. Oh, fuck. I'm a fucking idiot. Hello there. Thank you for watching my video. Any feedback would be much appreciated. Did you know that I stream sometimes and that I have a Twitter account? Both are linked down below. Have a fantastic day, you beautiful human being you. Bye bye now.